Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for another event of Brunel Cup of Science, as you can see here. I hope you all have your essential accessory, which is hidden by the media here. We're already on topic, essential accessory. A cup of science, we'll have a cup of science, especially towards the end of the session today. We actually will have a real brainstorming session with Meredith. So I hope you stay tuned until the end. Good, and I would especially thank Dr. Meredith Jones, who for her time today here for the discussion that we'll have together. The question is, how are you today? And I hope you're all very well. But perhaps due to the weather, maybe you're not too bad. And if you haven't had enough coffee, and if you answer, I don't know, then it's the right time to have more caffeine or more a cup of tea, or decrease the amount of milk you put in your tea. Right, Meredith. Meredith comes from Australia. She's done a degree in English from Melbourne University, and then has a honors degree from the University of Sydney, and the topic there was women's studies, and that somehow makes a link with how she sees, or she has a feminist approach to cosmetic surgery. We're gonna talk about this in a few minutes. Then she went down to the Western University of Sydney, Western Sydney University, sorry, to do a PhD in cultural studies. And through this quite successful curriculum, she became an expert in popular culture, visuality, and embodiment. How do we see our bodies through media? And she has been very productive. She published 5 books, and when one realizes how time-consuming and how much energy you spend to write a book, I think this is a great achievement. Her latest book is Beautyscapes, Mapping Cosmetic Surgery to Tourism. I think you really have a sense for good titles, Meredith. Beauty escapes, and of course, when you are escaping for financial reasons to some countries to perform cheaper cosmetic surgery, and this is really capturing the topic of your book already here. So this is a very interesting book.
Yeah.
It won. It was shortlisted for an award, and I think since then it won an award here in 2020 from the Foundation for the Sociology of Health and Illness. So that is a great achievement. Published in the Manchester University Press. Your first book, again, always in the topic of cosmetic surgery, entitled Skin Tight, again, a very nice title, An Anatomy of Cosmetic Surgery. And I particularly like the cover here, the image that you have in the cover. Of course, we are all performing cosmetic surgery to fill in the cracks, as you can see on this face here, on this mannequin. But perhaps that if you pull on your skin too much, then that might actually, well, crack or break your visual identity if you go too far. And maybe we are going to have a few questions about that for you, Meredith. So probably there is the dark side of cosmetic surgery if you do it too much, if you pull on the skin too much. If I can follow up with this metaphor here about skin tight. Now I'd like to look at your other titles that you wrote, and these come from some of your book chapters. And also from your edited journal volumes. These are only a few. I've just selected a few of those, and they're in bold and red here. We are all trying to increase citations when we are writing a piece, right? And I think this is a very good lesson that you are giving us when you are using words such as Facebook in your title, when you are using words such as Photoshop in your title, that really increases the number of clicks that you might get, especially when you use search tools such as Google. And clearly, Facebook and facelifts, this is a very nice title. And again, on the topic of cosmetic surgery, new clothes, new faces, new bodies, cosmetic surgery and fashion. Beauty and the Beast, well, no, it's Beauty and the Beach, mapping cosmetic surgery, tourism. A very nice wordplay here. And then media bodies, Photoshop. And in discussion with you last week, Meredith, you told me that this chapter was has been read a lot. So again, this is again a sign that you are attracting a lot of interest. Kardashians, and you have held a few scholar symposium called Kimposiums about the Kardashians, and we might want to speak about that later on as well. Now, I just want to transition with my first question, and all of you here in the audience have used Zoom, Teams for the past year for the reasons that you know. And I think one of the latest updates in Zoom really allowed us to add those studio effects that some might know from TikTok or other sort of mobile phone applications that you can use. And you can add eyebrows if you wish. So you can have a beard. Well, I'd actually wish they have a freshly shaven option in there, but I couldn't find that. So I find it would be really useful for myself. But anyway, you can enhance your lip color. So that is great. And you might have used those for fun. Especially those ones where if you want to look like a cucumber when you speak, or if you want to have cat ears and so on and so forth. I think that's all great. Have you ever used those filters on Zoom, maybe to enhance your skin color, not to have to wear makeup on calls with your family, or you've never used those filters on Zoom? And that actually brings me, I'll stop sharing now, brings me to the first question I have for you, Meredith, is that now that we are looking at our face a lot on Zoom calls, and some are actually biased, instead of speaking to the camera or speaking to the person that they are meeting, they're actually watching themselves while speaking, somehow having this visual feedback of how they look to, or do they appear to the audience. And also the fact that we are using all those filters, are we becoming more aware of all the changes that we can apply to our body? Somehow, do we have an increased cosmetic literacy? And do you think that by being used to modifying our skin, putting on our skin, adding eyebrows or beard, are we going to see an increased number of actual cosmetic surgeries? So we are used to be photoshopping ourselves now. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer, of course, is that I don't know, because there aren't statistics about this, but there's lots of anecdotal evidence, and certainly journalism via some cosmetic surgeons is telling us that actually, first of all, people didn't stop having cosmetic surgery throughout different lockdowns, where people were allowed in different parts of the world. Some people did use the fact of lockdown to actually go and have cosmetic surgery because they knew they wouldn't be out and about. They knew that they could recover quietly at home. But surgeons are certainly reporting people coming in, sometimes with photos of their own faces having had filters on them, saying, I want to look like this all the time. For me, it would be nice if those filters, were the cucumber or the cat ears or the rabbit whiskers or whatever, but obviously they're not. They're, the so-called beautification filters. So there is some reportage of that. there was a really interesting article in The Guardian this morning via their San Francisco correspondent, writing that another effect of lockdown is that some people, especially some women, don't want to stop wearing masks outdoors. And it's well, it's a very similar reason really, which is that wearing the mask frees you in some ways from a kind of relentless gaze that we have, both from others and of ourselves. And I think that relentless gaze, certainly for someone like me and like you, we're on Zoom all day long, we can't avoid seeing ourselves, you know, all day long. It can be very repressive. So I think it's a mix. It's partly I want to get away from this vision of myself all the time, and it's partly I want to improve this vision of myself. Yeah, it'll be very interesting once we're really fully out of lockdown, if that ever happens, how many people are turning up at cosmetic surgeons wanting to look a bit more like their filtered selves.
That's very interesting how you would turn up at a cosmetic surgeon and actually show him a picture of a cucumber.
Yeah, well, surgeons used to report people turning up, for example, with a photo of Jennifer Aniston or a photo of, you know, some famous movie star. Now they're reporting people turning up with enhanced versions of themselves, which I think in itself is a very interesting social development.
Yeah. So we've become masters of Photoshop, and somehow instead of using the surgeon knife, we actually apply an electronic knife ourselves through Photoshop and all those.
Yeah, we can. And most people are very clear about the difference between those two things. But sometimes you'll get people who probably in another time would have been maybe seeking cosmetic surgery for, let's say, unhealthy reasons. And those people really genuinely, you know, are seeking to look like photoshopped versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm. And due to the lack of poll everywhere today, I'm sort of tempted to read one comment here from Akram in the chat, where somehow we might lose our identity. And now you can see I've got a background. I do not appear to be in my office at home. I'm somewhere. It could be a second me. So we could have multiple avatars. I could be myself, I could be someone else, so, you know, and are we losing our identity?
What I've found in my research over over 2 decades really of researching people who've had cosmetic surgery and asking them questions about it and really listening to their answers is that most people who have cosmetic surgery, if not all, feel that they've somehow uncovered a sense of self that's closer to the real. So they're seeking to demonstrate externally their real internal selves through cosmetic surgery. And that could take all sorts of different forms, but that's what people report. They don't report losing a sense of identity, they report gaining one, or having one that's more integrated.
They feel they have a mismatch between the external envelope somehow that nature gave them by birth, and they want to change this to somehow.
Absolutely, but not necessarily nature. It's sometimes nature, but just as often circumstance. So especially, for example, you know, people who may have had very hard lives in whatever way, they might be wrinkled ahead of the time they thought they should be wrinkled. They might have all sorts of manifestations on their face or their body of age, of weight loss, of changes that have happened that have been in some ways out of their control, and they've been left with a body and or a face that they don't feel reflects them. So it can be circumstance as much as nature. Yeah,
that is a very good point. Yes, Meredith. And you mentioned, you know, we spend our days on Zoom, also lecturing students. We are switching on our video but students often do not. Most of the time they don't. And as lecturers, I suppose we would wish they do, because that would improve the interactivity of our lectures. Somehow we'd have feedback on what we say. We would see them frowning. I guess the concept of frowning is going to come back during the interview today. And this is somehow how you would expect millennials, the selfie generation, to, be used to look at their faces, take photos of themselves. So why aren't they not at ease with Zoom and switching on their videos, as they are with publishing their selfies on Facebook and all the other social media?
Yeah, well, this was a real surprise to lots of us who are quite aware of the so-called selfie generation, the Instagram generation, the Snapchat generation, that are, on more than a daily basis putting photos of themselves online. And I think lots of us expected that we would be the sort of novices once it came to lecturing online, and that the students would be very confident, in there with their videos on, etc. This digital generation. And it actually turned out to be the opposite. I took one class of, in first term, it was nearly 90 students, and not a single one ever put their video on, except right at the end when they knew it was just me and them. And I think that what it is that they're so aware that they are living in an image-based world, in a digital world, where there is this hypervigilance on appearance, and it's being judged all the time. And what they actually are doing, if you look at it and think about it, what they're doing on Snapchat and on Instagram and on all of their social media platforms, is they are very, very carefully choosing how to represent themselves. So it's a form of control. A photo might look spontaneous and like it's just been quickly snapped and put on, but the person in the photo has had control of that. They've chosen when, where, the angle, the lighting. They may have snapped 15 shots and then put up the best one. There's all sorts of ways that they've maintained control over that. And of course, for every image that goes online, there's probably 100 that don't. So
there's some cosmetic work on the selfie itself, by just contracting your muscles in such a way, making,
indeed, and controlling the angle of where you're holding your phone does a lot to change the shape of your face. So the thought for this generation of actually putting themselves live on video in front of peers and not having control of how they look is, in a way, I think, probably more frightening than it is for people who are not from that generation, because they're used to that control, and more importantly, they're used to that very sometimes vicious scrutiny of their appearances.
True. Of course, the social look on yourself, it becomes really, really important when you're publishing, and when that media is out there publicly, and often when it is recorded as well. Great. Then it looks to me, and we discussed last week when we prepared this interview, that over the books that you've wrote, and you realize that there's been a change in why we are making cosmetic surgery, and also the results of it. A bit like your Skin Tight cover, where you have the cracks on the mannequin. It looks like maybe a genuine or subtle surgery would be to fill in the cracks and look like we were before. But are we now going towards surgeries where you are over enhancing yourself and making it bolder? So do you see that change? And can you comment on that?
Yeah, I like the description of it being bolder rather than being overdone, because I'm always very reluctant to make judgments about the body modifications that people choose. Certainly, when I began researching cosmetic surgery, people were very, very secretive about it. So many of my early round of interviewees, my first round of interviewees, many of them had never spoken to anyone about it before, about their cosmetic surgery. There was even one woman who had a new husband since she'd had her cosmetic surgery, which was breast implants, and she had not told her husband that she had them. Whether he knew, I have no idea, but even her husband, and I think, now I'm just recollecting, I don't think she'd told her children either. So that was the situation 20 years ago. And other people, the women who were having so-called anti-aging cosmetic surgery, you know, to look younger, they were also not wanting to talk about it publicly. It was meant to be barely noticeable. They were meant to look better without anyone really knowing why they looked better. And they were certainly not going to talk publicly about it or tell anyone about it. What I've seen change is that people are now, cosmetic surgery now, of course, is much more mainstream. Many, many more people actually have it. The statistics have gone right up worldwide, but there are far less people now being secretive about it. So, and that's for a whole lot of reasons. For quite young people, we're getting people in their 20s or even younger having cosmetic surgery, and for them it's obviously not about anti-aging. It's not about capturing some look that they had 10 or 20 years ago. It's about achieving a feature or a set of features that are fashionable and admirable and to do with status. And they don't have any interest in keeping it secret. So having lip implants or lip injections sort of aligns you with the Kylie Jenners of the world. It's also extremely hard to deny that you've had lip injections. Like, you can go ahead and do it, but no one will believe you. So they've become kind of status symbols. And then, you know, it's happening in very interesting ways in different parts of the world as well. So cosmetic surgery is absolutely not monolithic. It's completely locally based and very much influenced by local fashions. So in Iran, for example, having a nose job is a symbol of status in some parts of Tehran in particular. Even to the degree that people will sometimes wear a set of nose bandages out on a Saturday night, but they haven't had the nose job, right? So the bandages themselves are a status symbol. I find that fascinating. And then, of course, in somewhere like South Korea, where we've got something like 60% of women and 40% of men under the age of 40 have had some sort of cosmetic surgery work done to their face, it's almost beyond even being a status symbol. It's a way to be part of mainstream culture. So you won't be hiding, you won't pretend that you've been born like this. It's almost better to have paid the money and chosen and worked to become like this. So these are some, you know, really profound changes that have happened. And of course, they're in line with very profound social and cultural changes that have taken place over the last 20 years, not least digital media and the rise of, you know, images absolutely everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And I can see some parallels with clothing, fashion. Sometimes you are buying yourself very bold clothing who might actually be completely disproportionate on you, but yet that I don't know, if you have Prada, a big label on your coat, then you belong to a certain status, to a certain society. And
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously, beautiful tailoring is still something wonderful that makes us all look better, but we will often judge a garment's status by the brand label on it. And those labels are increasingly on the outside rather than by a garment's fabric or tailoring. So yes, it's like we've all become kind of walking advertisements.
Right. And it does look like switching to the Kardashians now.
Kardashians, yeah.
Where it seems like they've really attracted either really lovingly or love and hate relationship with social media. Like people love them or people hate them. And well, you've written some essays, some books on them, and you also had a Kymposium. So what are those symposiums about?
Well, the Kymposium was back in 2015, and we've got Kymposium, the sequel, happening this September, and people can find that on the ICS website. We've currently got a call for papers out for that symposium, which will be entirely online. I first wanted to hold the Kymposium because I watched this show. I thought it was interesting. I noticed that it was a matriarchy. I noticed that it was a group of women who were doing and saying some extremely contemporary things. They almost seemed to embody the height of popular culture at that time. And indeed, they've continued to do that since I first noticed them. But then when I went to social media to, follow them and to have a look at articles about them and find out whether academics had been engaging with them at all, I found this incredible, sometimes actually violent hostility being expressed towards them. And the problem seemed to be, well, I identified the problem straight away as misogyny, because what people would say would be, who are these useless women, famous for being famous, doing nothing, they've got no talent, why is anybody interested? And of course, lots of this commentary was so vehement that as it asked those questions that I was asking, well, you're clearly really interested. You're interested enough to get in there and, dig the knife in. So maybe you should just be asking yourself the question, why you're so disturbed by these people.
And do you think they got on the train at the right time somehow with maybe a new middle class arising from the working class, and just maybe in the US, Latinos?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Kardashians really have kind of surfed a wave for a long time. Surfed several waves. That one of their great talents is getting in at the right time, at the right place with sort of new movements. And one of the things they've changed, Kim in particular, is ideal women's bodies, the notion of what an ideal woman's body is in a global sense. Really, before the Kardashians, we had a notion that an ideal woman's body was tall, thin, white, and blonde. Of course, that still exists, but Kim Kardashian and a couple of others really brought a new sort of ideal body to the mainstream. And of course, it was shorter, more curvaceous. It was not kind of typically white, so it looks a little bit more Latina, although the Kardashians are not Latina, and it's brunette, of course. So one of the things they did was they, in terms of being there at the right time, they demonstrated a kind of body that a new middle class in America was much more comfortable with. And this is that as Latinas have become more middle class in America, the last thing you want to do if you're marketing to anyone is present role models that they can never connect to.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just one of the many ways the Kardashians have really been in the right place at the right time. But they've done that in such a smart way. It's not coincidence. They are talented people. It's a new sort of talent.
And I suppose that explains this love and hate relationship. You can love them for what they represent. They also allow a lot of women to be represented up there, but also this opportunistic approach that maybe is, being successful just for the success is probably not always.
That's right. That's one of the things their haters hate, is that, they don't have old-fashioned sort of talent, and they make no apologies for being kind of relentlessly commercial, for relentlessly selling themselves. But what they're doing is they are mirroring ourselves. They are mirroring our culture back to us. So we've created them. They are kind of the quintessential examples of some parts of our culture that, may continue to grow. Maybe they're at their pinnacle now, and we don't like it. So an easy option when we're so uncomfortable with those things in this culture is to take it out on individuals and to blame them. And that's what the Kardashians get a lot of.
Can we then in general use fashion as a way to predict societal movements from one class to another class? So who are the next Kardashian?
Oh my God.
That word.
Well, I've been wondering.
Who's the next Kim?
Oh yeah. I think Kim's the next Kim, honestly. So they already have a new show lined up. I've been wondering ever since they announced the end of Keeping Up with the Kardashians what they're all going to do. I've just found out on the weekend they've got a new show lined up. It's very strange that the kind of Kardashian copy reality TV shows have not been successful. So there's something about them, there's something about this recipe that they have and this mix that they have that hasn't quite been able to be duplicated yet. So yeah, I think one of the things we'll definitely be talking about at Kymposium, the sequel, is what they're all doing in September.
Right, yeah.
We don't know yet. Yeah.
I think that's going to be a fantastic event, and that's going to happen in September, right?
In September, yes.
Symposium, the sequel. Fantastic.
Yep.
Good. So I'd like to talk a bit about yourself and the Institute. You're the director of the Institute of Communities and Society. And of course, in that institute, you are overarching research in a lot impacts and relationship with external stakeholders in a lot of disciplines. So it's a very multidisciplinary world out there. So what do you think in your expertise, in your profile, makes you really somehow a good director? It's a direct question, you see. But
Yes. Well, I've only been in the job for a month, so maybe I can't even say whether I'm a good director yet or not. But certainly all of my own work has been multidisciplinary, especially the work on cosmetic surgery tourism. Me and my colleagues, David Bell and Ruth Holliday, worked with all sorts of people from the cosmetic surgery tourism industry, from surgeons through to taxi drivers, through to hoteliers. So I'm very used to working with people from disciplines very different to mine, notably surgeons. I've also done work with designers. Suzanne Boccolate, I worked with her on 2 of my books, the one about hair and the one about blood. So that's a little bit of it. And of course, my discipline in my PhD was cultural studies, which is inherently interdisciplinary anyway. But I think really the thing that qualifies me as director of the new institute is that I was director of the Global Lives Research Centre at Brunel for 3 years. that research centre was within CBAS, but it had to be interdisciplinary. Its remit was interdisciplinary. So every project we supported covered at least two, it covered researchers from at least two departments, and many of them researchers from more than two departments. So 3 years of doing that, I think that the step up to Institute Director is a logical one, not necessarily an easy one. I'm obviously right out of my comfort zone now. I'll be, you know, you're a neuroscientist. I'll be working with, you know, for example, the Centre for Flood Risk and Resilience, which is run by a river scientist. But I think it's incredibly exciting thinking about how social scientists, artists, and humanities scholars can work with STEM disciplines right from the start, not as add-ons, but building projects right from the start that are truly interdisciplinary in that way. And that's really my overarching aim with this institute.
This maps really well with what funders want now. They really want multidisciplinary proposals, bringing together people from different fields to address one topic, but obviously that topic is becoming more and more general. So that is also...
That's right, and it's incredibly challenging, but it is really exciting. In addition to funders increasingly wanting truly interdisciplinary projects, they also increasingly want them to be international. So with, you know, the latest, you know, round of funding from, you know, advertisements from various places is asking for between 3 and 5 interdisciplinary teams international teams to work together in interdisciplinary ways. So yeah, there are multiple levels of inter, if you like.
I would wish the funding levels to go up as well, funding amounts, but
yes.
that doesn't always, there is not a good correlation between the number of partners and how much money you receive, unfortunately.
That's right.
But great. So you mentioned your PhD in cultural studies. What was really the moment where you became so interested in cosmetic surgery?
Well, it actually happened in my honours year. So in Australia, we have 3-year degrees, and then we have an optional 4th year, which is called the honours year. And in that year is the year you do your dissertation as well as some more other coursework. And in that year, I wanted to write my dissertation about so-called B-grade actors or actresses. And I found myself raving on one day to my supervisor, who's a historian, Alison Bashford, and I was raving on to her about Demi Moore and about how Demi Moore's career had taken off, because of course Demi Moore was a B-grade actress and became kind of A-grade immediately after having breast implants. And so I was talking to my supervisor about this, and obviously must have been quite passionate about it, because she said, just stop there, Meredith, write about breast implants. And so I said, oh, okay. So nobody had really done it before. I wrote about breast implants, and then I went on to do, that was for a year, then I went on to do a PhD with Zoe Safoulis, who had done her PhD with Donna Haraway. So I love telling people that Donna Haraway is my academic grandmother. That's a lovely thing. And Zoe is a feminist of science and technology, and her guidance in my PhD, which was about anti-aging cosmetic surgery, was invaluable. And really then, you know, my first book came out of my PhD, and then I have actually tried to escape from being a kind of only someone who does cosmetic surgery studies, and I do other things, but I keep coming back to it because it's an area that changes all of the time. I look away for a year and I come back and, oh my God, there's a whole new set of techniques. There's a whole new country that's doing something incredibly interesting. So I do keep finding myself drawn back to it.
What is the hot topic in cosmetic surgery now, in one sentence? The new thing that appeared over a year ago.
I think it's to do with lockdown, and it's to do with us as a culture increasingly wanting to look like two-dimensional versions of ourselves. So I've got a project on the go about this. I've just applied for funding. So it's seeing these two-dimensional versions of ourselves. You know, I'm seeing one of myself now, you are, and yet we exist in 3D. We are flesh and muscle and bone. And the ways that those 2D images intersect with our three-dimensional selves. You know, we've got two-dimensional selves and three-dimensional selves, and that intersection, I think, is being dealt with in all sorts of ways, but one of the ways is through cosmetic surgery.
Great, that's nice, interesting topic out there. I hope you get your proposal.
Thank you.
Now, you mentioned your career, and quite typically, you know, things happen, events happen, not always in a straight line. You know, it's going left and right. But what would be, and it worked really well for you, what would be your advice for ECRs, early career researchers? There's a lot in your institute, in your fields, sociology, and which I think is different. Each college at Brunel University has its own particularity. So what would be the advice that you give them to have a successful career?
Yeah, well, I guess there are two main stages of being an early career researcher. And the first stage is before you have an academic position. And then, of course, at that point, the anxiety, the focus is on getting that job. And that, indeed, that stage is while you're doing your PhD as well. You know, doctoral researchers are early career researchers. And I would say at that stage, the most important thing is to have a plan B. You may not get an academic job. Plan Bs can include all sorts of government jobs, non-government organisations, the kinds of groups that your research is going to help, that your research is focused on improving the lives of. Who are they? How might you actually turn that into a full-time career? If, you know, maybe that's your plan A, actually. Maybe it's not plan B. So that's the first thing I think to think about. And then once you do have an academic job, those connections, those organisations, institutes, individuals, groups, they're going to be your partners, right? They're going to be your interdisciplinary partners. They're going to be your industry partners. They're going to be the people that you need to get funding in this new interdisciplinary international world that of granting that is incredibly competitive. So, yeah, I guess my advice is that while all of your academic connections are incredibly important, those non-academic networks are absolutely crucial, that they will be your partners, not least because those are the groups that your research is going to benefit. So keep them close. Yeah. And the other thing I'd say to ECRs is your health, your friends and your family are more important than publications or grants. So look after yourselves.
Yeah, this is the base of the pyramid, and if that works well, then that supports everything that comes on top. That's really very important. Thank you, Meredith, for that. Now, I'd like, and we'll have maybe a few minutes for questions and answers with the audience that we have today. But I wanted to have a multidisciplinary exercise with you, and you know that's what the institutes are for. And we discussed last week for the first time. Again, there's probably not much in common between you and I, but this is, I think, why forums such Brunel Cup of Science are very important, because we often have meetings where we have a purpose. And that doesn't give you space for foraging, for moving around the focus and finding new ideas. And when you and I met, we didn't have an agenda. We just knew that we had to talk about something. And then it just happened that we had this idea, neuroscience, how do we react to someone that probably has Botox injections, and if you don't see that person frowning, how can you detect emotions? And it actually looks like if you have Botox injections, your own brain activity, centers that look at emotions, that process emotions, changes.
Yes.
So how interesting is this? And are we going to make people happier if they cannot frown? What do you think?
Or sadder? We don't know. Yeah, look, I think I have a colleague in Australia who I've been talking about this quite a lot over the last couple of years. She is a neurodiversity specialist, and you're the first neuroscientist I've ever spoken to about it. But that, there is a little bit of research that shows that Botox actually changes the emotions of the person who's had it. People certainly report feeling happier. And of course, that's for 1,000 reasons. It could be that the pain of the injection is ended. I don't know. But it could well be because you can't frown anymore. And we know that the movement of our faces actually influences our mood. That's why there are such things as laughing workshops. But the other really, so that's something to be investigated. And I think, maybe I'll knock on your lab door, I think, and we need to start that project. But the other thing, of course, is measuring the reactions of people, of others, yes. And I am especially interested in children and even in babies. So how this would have to be a long-term project, I think, to look at how the children of people who are heavily Botoxed go on to have a kind of facial literacy. How do they read faces? Maybe they're better at reading faces because they have to work harder at it. Maybe they don't recognise some emotions. I think, it's an absolutely fascinating area, and the little bits that have been done, mainly by psychologists, do point to some very interesting findings in these areas.
Yes, I find the thoughts of others and babies particularly scary, but perhaps it's not that scary when you think that obviously they interact with the parents a lot, but they also interact with others. So there will be some compensations there. And as you say, maybe they'll be better at detecting emotions if they have to read a bit more in details.
Read harder, yes. I mean, all we have to do is look at, someone like Nicole Kidman on any movie or TV show she's on. I'm talking about Nicole Kidman now, not decades ago. And she has to work quite hard to show emotion on her face, and the audience has to work hard to interpret the emotion. So it's a different kind of acting that she does. I've actually had a conversation with an actor who's one of my PhD students about this, and he says that what she's doing is more like body acting. So she has to use her body a lot more to express certain emotions, and it can be funny, but it's also really interesting. It's funny because there's a lot of eye acting, where she can't actually move, but there's this sort of weird eye acting that happens. But he says it's a lot more to do with her body than her face now.
Goes back to what happens when we wear masks, where
yes,
it's very difficult also to read out someone else's emotions, because
That's right.
the eyes can smile, but perhaps not as much as
Yeah.
your mouth.
There's actually a really nice piece of research about women in niqabs who recognize each other from a distance, and it shows this incredible literacy to do with the way someone walks, to
Good
do with
point.
the way, they might hold their head, to do with, their height, their shape, etc. All kind of read through this complete black covering, but actually women are very, very good at recognizing each other from a distance. So we do build up these really subtle forms of visual literacy and kind of recognition literacy, I suppose you might call it.
Thank you, Meredith. I think this is ending the questions that I had for you. I think you're very lucky. You work in a fascinating field. I really enjoyed the conversation I had with you, so thank you very much. We have maybe a couple of minutes from the audience if they want to pop in a question down there in the chat. I can see someone, Anne, asked about masks. So that was the same question here. And Akram also about time-dependent. Emotions are time-dependent. Does it become negative after the initial heightened state?
Could be, but the research is not there, Akram. So, we need to do it.
Great. So I think we'll end it up here. You probably have to get ready for the next events of the day.
Yep.
So thank you very much, the audience, especially to you, Meredith, for your time and the questions.
It's been my pleasure, and I love your job. I love that you get to interview people, about all sorts of things. So interesting.
It's my way to learn about multidisciplinarity. So we'll see each other next week for another interview. And again, thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye now.
Thanks, Marco.